Infanteria, to je láska má. Infanteria.
Onward to chapter 10. Part 1 will begin with Stefan Yarabek, who was a Czechoslovak American and president of Friends of Czech Greenways, and will be checking in from Saugerties, New York. Be followed by Eric Oleson, an actor in Brooklyn. We'll go from there to Megan Metrikin, who is a South African actor and writer who is in New York. Then over to DeYonker, also a New York-based actor currently in Denver, Colorado. Then back to Brooklyn with Michelle Beshaw, a theater artist and performer. And then on to part 4 of chapter 10 with J.B. Alexander, an actor and playwright here in New York. So with that, get ready to turn it over to Stefan.
Dobrý večer. Švejk's odyssey began anew under the honorable escort of 2 soldiers with fixed bayonets who had to conduct him to the chaplain. His escort were men who complemented each other. If one was lanky, the other was small and tubby. The lanky one limped with his right foot and the small tubby one with his left. Both served behind the lines because sometime before the war, they had been totally exempted from military service. They walked solemnly alongside the pavement from time to time, looking sideways at Švejk, who strode in the middle and saluted everyone he saw. His mufti and the military cap he got when he joined up had got lost in the garrison stores. Before they discharged him, they had given him an old military uniform which had belonged to some pot-bellied fellow who was taller than him by a head. As for the trousers, 3 more Švejks could have gotten into them. An endless succession of baggy folds from his feet up to where his trousers reached up over his chest involuntarily evoked the admiration of the spectators. A vast tunic with patches on the elbows covered with grease and dirt dangled around Švejk like a coat on a scarecrow. His trousers hung on him like a circus clown's costume. The military cap, which they had also changed in the garrison gown, came down over his ears. Švejk answered the smiles of the spectators with a sweet smile of his own and the warm, tender look of his good-natured eyes. And so they marched to the chaplain's apartment at Karlin. The first of the 2 to speak to Švejk was the small, tubby one. They were just at that moment in Malastranya, down under the arches. "Where do you come from?" asked the small, tubby one. "From Praha." "And you're not going to run away?" Now the lanky one joined the conversation. It is a very remarkable phenomenon that people who are small and fat are generally good-humored optimists, whereas people who are lanky and spindly are, on the contrary, skeptics. And so the lanky one said he'd run away if he could. "But why should he?" replied the small, tubby one. "Now he's out of the garrison gown, he's practically free. I'm carrying it in the bundle here." "What's in the bundle for the chaplain?" asked the lanky one. "I don't know." "There you see, you don't know, and yet you talk about it." They crossed the Charles Bridge in complete silence. In Charles Street, the small, tubby one spoke to Švejk again. "Do you know why we're taking you to the chaplain?" "For confession," Švejk said nonchalantly. "Tomorrow they're going to hang me. This is what they always do in these occasions, and then they call it spiritual consolation." "And why are they going to?" The lanky one asked cautiously, while the tubby one looked pityingly at Švejk. Each was a small tradesman from the country, a paterfamilias. "I don't know," replied Švejk with his good-natured smile. "I haven't the faintest idea. It must be fate." "Perhaps you were born under an unlucky star," remarked the little fellow with a knowing air and in sympathy. "At home in Yashinya, near Yosifov, during the war with Prussia, they hanged someone just like that. They came to fetch him, didn't say anything to him, and hanged him in Yosibov. If you ask me, said the lanky one skeptically, they don't hang a person for nothing at all. There must be some reason for it, so they can justify it. When there is a war on, remarked Švejk, they justify it. But when there is, they don't worry about you. You could just as well fall at the front or be hanged at home, 6 of one or half a dozen of the other. I say, you're not a political, are you? Asked the lanky one. The tone of his question indicated that he was beginning to take to Švejk. Yes, I'm much too political, replied Švejk with a smile. You aren't a National Socialist. Now it was the turn of the small, tubby one to start being cautious. Breaking in on the conversation, he said, what's that got to do with us anyway? There are lots of people around here and they're watching us. If we could only take off our bayonets in a passage somewhere without attracting attention. You won't run away from us, will you? We'd have trouble if you did. Aren't I right, Tonik? He said to the lanky one, who answered quietly. We could take off our bayonets. After all, he's one of us. He ceased being a skeptic and his heart filled with compassion for Švejk. They looked for a suitable passage where they could take off their bayonets, and the tubby one allowed Švejk to walk alongside him. You'd like a smoke, wouldn't you? I wonder whether, he wanted to say, I wonder whether they allow you to have a smoke before they hang you. But he could not complete the sentence, realizing that it might be tactless. They all had a smoke until Švejk's escort began to tell him about their families in the country near Hradec Králové, their wives and children, their plot of land, and their cow. I'm thirsty, said Švejk. The lanky one and small tubby one exchanged glances. We might drop in somewhere for a quick one, said a little fellow, feeling he could count on the lanky one's consent, but somewhere where it won't attract attention. Let's go to Kruklik, Švejk suggested. You can put your rifles in the kitchen there. The landlord, Serabone, is a Sokol, and you don't need to be afraid of him. They play the violin and the accordion there, continued Švejk, and tarts come in and various other members of good society who aren't allowed in the representak. The lanky one and the small one exchanged glances once more, and then the lanky one said, very well then, let's go. It's still a long way to Karling. On the way, Švejk told them various stories, and they arrived at Kruklik in a good mood and did exactly as Švejk had advised. They put their rifles in the kitchen and went into the bar. The violin and accordion filled the room with the strains of the popular song. At Pankrex, there's a hill, and on that hill there stands a lovely row of trees. A young lady who was sitting on the knees of a jaded youth with smoothly parted hair was singing in a hoarse voice. I had a girl lined up, and now another's pinched her. At one table, a drunken sardine hawker was asleep. He woke up from time to time, struck the table with his fist, stuttered out, it's no good, and fell asleep again. Under a mirror behind the billiard table sat 3 other young ladies who shouted at a railway guard, young man, stand us up a glass of vermouth. Near the orchestra, 2 people were quarreling about whether Mashka had been caught the previous night by the patrol or not. One of them saw it with his own eyes, and the other maintained that she had gone to bed with a soldier at the Hotel Umbashu. By the door, a soldier was sitting with a number of civilians and telling them how he had been wounded in Serbia. He had been a bandaged arm, and his pockets were full of cigarettes they had given him. He said that he couldn't drink anymore, but one of the company, a bald-headed old man, kept on offering him something. Have another, soldier. Who knows if we'll ever meet again? Shall I get them to play something for you? Do you like the orphan child? This was the bald-headed man's old favorite song. And sure enough, presently, the violin and accordion started to wail it out. Tears came into his eyes, and he started to sing in a tremulous voice. When it grew to wiser years, it asked about its mama. It asked about its mama. From the other table, somebody said, "Stop it, can't you? Go on and stuff it up. String yourself up on a hook. Get to bloody hell with your orphan child." And as a final trump, the rival table began to sing, two-part, it breaks my heart, my heart. Fronta, they called to the wounded soldier when they had outsung and drowned the orphan child. "Leave them and come and sit with us." Sorry. "They can go to hell. You come and bring the cigarettes here. You won't amuse those mugs." Nice driveway, Eric Olson. It's on to you.
Thank you. Švejk conjured up memories of the time when he often used to sit here before the war. The police inspector, Drashner, used to raid the place, and the prostitutes were scared of him and made up songs about him full of double entendres. He remembered how they sang in a chorus, "When Drashner made his raid, Marjana wasn't afraid. In all the hullabaloo, she'd knocked back quite a few." And just at that moment, who should have come in but the terrible and ruthless Drashner himself, accompanied by his men. It was like shooting into a flock of partridges. The plainclothes police herded all the people together in a bunch, and Švejk found himself in it too, because with his usual bad luck, he had said to Inspector Drashner when he was asked to show his papers, "Have you got permission for this from police headquarters?" Švejk also remembered a poet who used to sit there under the mirror and in the general uproar of kuklik, amidst the strains and sounds of the accordion, used to write poems and recite them to the prostitutes. On the other hand, Švejk's escort had no such reminiscences. For them, it was quite a new experience, and they began to like it. The first who found complete satisfaction here was the small tubby one, because people of his type tend to be not only optimists, but epicures. The lanky one struggled with himself for a short time, and just as he had already lost his skepticism, so he now began to gradually lose his self-control and the rest of his good sense also. "I'm going to have a dance," he said after his fifth beer, when he saw how couples were dancing the schlapak. The little one abandoned himself completely to dissipation. A young lady sat next to him and told him dirty stories. His eyes sparkled. Švejk drank. The lanky one finished his dance and returned with his partner to the table. Then they sang, danced, drank without interruption, and spanked their lady companions. And in the atmosphere of venal love, nicotine, and alcohol, there was ever present, if barely perceptible, the old slogan, "Après nous, le déluge." In the afternoon, a soldier came up to them and offered them a boil with blood poisoning for 5 guilders. He had with him a hypodermic syringe and could inject paraffin into their legs or arms. With this, they would be in bed for at least 2 months, and if they fed the wound with saliva, they could perhaps spin it out to half a year and be completely discharged from the army. Author's note: this is a fairly well-proved method of getting into hospital. But the smell of the paraffin, which remains in the boil, gives it away. Petrol is better because it evaporates quicker. Subsequently, a mixture of ether and petrol used to be injected, and later other improvements were introduced. The lanky one, who by now had completely lost his mental balance, went to the WC and had the soldier inject paraffin under the skin of his leg. As it was already getting towards evening, Švejk proposed that they resume their journey to the chaplain. The small tubby one, who was already beginning to wander, tried to persuade Švejk to stay a little longer. The lanky one was also of the opinion that the chaplain could wait, but Švejk was not enjoying it anymore in Kuklik and threatened to go on alone. And so they left, but he had to promise them that they would all stop somewhere again. They stopped at a small cafe at Florence, where the tubby one pawned his silver watch so that they could go on having fun. When they left, Švejk was already leading them by the arm. It gave him an awful lot of trouble. Their feet kept on slipping, and they were all the time wanting to go somewhere. The small tubby one almost lost the bundle for the chaplain, and so Švejk was forced to carry it himself. Švejk had continually to alert them when an officer or an NCO came by. Now, after superhuman efforts and struggles, he managed to bring them to the house in Kralowska Avenue, where the chaplain lived. He fixed the bayonets on their rifles himself, and by poking them in the ribs, forced them to lead him instead of his leading them. On the first floor, where there was a visiting card on the door, Otto Katz, chaplain, a soldier came to open. From the drawing room could be heard voices and the clinking of bottles and glasses. "Humbly report, sir," said the lanky one with an effort in broken German and saluting the soldier. "One bundle and one man delivered." "Come in," said the soldier. "However did you manage to get into that state? The chaplain's the same way." The soldier spat. The soldier went off with a bundle. They waited in the hall for a long time until the door opened, and through it there flew, rather than walked, the chaplain himself. He was in a waistcoat and held a cigar in his hand. "Oh, so you're here already," he said to Švejk. "And these people brought you? Have you got any matches?" "Humbly report, sir, I haven't." "Oh, I haven't got any. Every soldier should have matches so that he can light up. A soldier who hasn't got any matches, well, what is he?" "Humbly report, sir, he is without matches," answered Švejk. "Oh, very good. He's without matches and can't give anyone a light. Well, that's one essential point, and now here's another. Your feet stink, Švejk." "Humbly report, sir, they don't." That was the second point. And now for the third. Do you drink spirits? "Humbly report, sir, I don't drink spirits, only rum." "Good. Well, just have a look at this soldier here. I borrowed him from Lieutenant Feldhuber. He's a batman. He doesn't drink anything. He's a total abstainer. And that's why he's going to be drafted to the front. But because a man like him is no use to me. He's not a batman, he's a cow. A cow also drinks only water and loads like an ox. You're a teetotaler," he said, addressing the soldier. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself, you nincompoop. You serve you across the jaw." The chaplain addressed himself to those who had escorted Švejk and who, in their endeavor to stand up straight, were wobbling about, vainly trying to prop themselves up on their rifles. "You drunk," said the chaplain. "You got drunk while on duty, huh? I'm going to have you locked up for that. Švejk, remove their rifles and take them into the kitchen. You're to guard them until the patrol comes to fetch you, and I shall telephone to the barracks." And so on this occasion, too, the truth of Napoleon's saying, "In war, the situation changes every moment," was entirely borne out. In the morning, these two had led Švejk under bayonet escort and had been afraid he might run away. Then he led them, and now finally had to guard them. They were not at first fully aware of this rapid change of fortune, and it only dawned on them when they were sitting in the kitchen and saw Švejk standing at the door with rifle and bayonet. "I could do with a drink," sighed the little optimist, while the lanky one again had a fit of skepticism and said the whole thing was a piece of lousy treason. He started loudly accusing Švejk of having landed them in this mess and reproached him that he had promised them that he would be hanged the next day. And now they could see that it was all a trick with his confession and his hanging. Švejk was silent and walked up and down by the door. "We've been bloody asses," shouted the lanky one. In the end, having listened to all the accusations, Švejk declared, "Now at any rate, you can see that the army's no picnic. I'm only doing my duty. I got into this just the same way as you did, but as the saying is, fortune smiled on me." "I could do with a drink," repeated the optimist in desperate tones. The lanky one got up and reeled towards the door. Let's go home, he said to Švejk. John, don't be a bloody fool. Get back, answered Švejk. I've got to guard you. Now we don't know each other anymore. The chaplain appeared at the door. I can't get through on the phone to the barracks, so you can go home and remember that when you're on duty, you can't go and get yourself sozzled. Now, quick, march! To the honor of the chaplain, may it be said that he did not get through to the barracks because he had no telephone at home, and in fact, was talking to a lampstand. And now, Metrikin, also in New York City.
Švejk had been the chaplain's batman for 3 days, but during all this time he had seen him only once. On the third day, Lieutenant Helmish Batman arrived to tell Švejk to come and fetch his chaplain. On the way, he told Švejk that the chaplain had had a quarrel with the lieutenant, had smashed the piano, was dead drunk, and refused to go home. Lieutenant Helmick was also drunk and had thrown the chaplain out into the corridor, where he was sitting on the floor by the doorway and dozing. When Švejk reached the spot, he shook the chaplain, and when the latter began to growl and opened his eyes, Švejk saluted and said, "Humbly report, sir, I'm here." "And what do you want here?" "Humbly report, sir, I've come to fetch you." "So you've come to fetch me, have you? And where are we going?" "To your apartment, sir." "Why do I have to go to my apartment? Aren't I in my apartment?" "Humbly report, sir, you're in the corridor of somebody else's house." "And how did I get here?" "Humbly report, sir, you were here on a visit." No, "Not on a visit. You're making a mistake." Švejk lifted the chaplain and propped him up against the wall. The chaplain lurched from side to side and rolled over him, saying, "I'm falling on you." "Falling on you," he repeated with an idiotic grin. Finally, Švejk managed to press the chaplain to the wall, where in this new position he started to doze again. Švejk woke him up. "What can I do for you?" said the chaplain, making a vain attempt to drag himself along the wall and sit on the floor. "Who are you, anyhow?" "Humbly report, sir," replied Švejk, pushing the chaplain back against the wall once more. "I'm your batman, your reverend, sir." "I haven't got any batman," said the chaplain with an effort, making another attempt to fall on the Švejk. "And I'm not a reverence. I'm a pig," he added, with the sincerity of a drunkard. "Let me go, sir, I don't know you." The little tussle ended in a complete victory for Švejk. He took advantage of it to drag the chaplain down the stairs into the carriage entrance, where the chaplain tried to stop him from dragging him onto the street. "I don't know you, sir," he kept saying to Švejk during the struggle. "Do you know Otto Kantz? That's me." "I've been with the Archbishop," he shouted, clinging to the gate in the carriage entrance. "The Vatican's interested in me, do you understand?" Švejk dropped the "humbly report, sir," and spoke to the chaplain in very familiar tones. "Drop it, I tell you," he said, "or I'll bash your flipper. We're going home and no more nonsense. Just shut up." The chaplain let go of the door and rolled over to Švejk. "Well, let's go somewhere, but I won't go to you, Suhu. I've got debts there." Švejk pushed him and carried him out of the carriage entrance and dragged him along the pavement in the direction of his home. "Who is that gentleman?" asked one of the spectators in the street. "He's my brother," said Švejk. "He got leave to come and visit me. He was so happy he got drunk. You see, he thought I was dead." The chaplain, who caught the last words, hummed a tune from an operetta which no one would have recognized, rose up and addressed the spectators. "Whoever of you is dead must report to Army Corps headquarters within 3 days so that his corpse can be sprinkled with holy water." And he lapsed into silence, endeavoring to fall nose first on the pavement, while Švejk held him under the arm and dragged him home. With his head thrust forward and his legs trailing behind him and dangling like those of a cat with a broken backbone, the chaplain was humming to himself, "Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu Dominus vobi." When they reached the droshky rack, Švejk propped the chaplain against the wall and went to haggle with the droshky driver about his transport. One of the drivers said he knew the gentleman very well, had had him as a passenger once, and would wouldn't ever take him again. He spewed over everything, he said bluntly, and didn't even pay for the ride. I drove him for more than 2 hours before he found where he lived. Only after a week, when I'd been to see him at last 3 times, did he give me anything, and then it was only 5 crowns for all that. After long haggling, one of the drivers agreed to take them. Švejk returned to the chaplain, who was sleeping. Someone had removed and carried off his bowler, for he generally went about in a mufti. Švejk woke him up and, with the help of the driver, got him to the droshky. Once inside, the chaplain fell into a state of complete torpor. Mistaking Švejk for the colonel, just of the 75th Infantry Regiment, he repeated several times, "Don't be angry, old chap, if I call you by your Christian name. I'm a peg." At one moment, it seemed that the jolting of the droshky on the cobbles was bringing him to his senses. He sat straight and began to sing a snatch of an unknown song. Perhaps it was only his fancy. "I recall that lovely time when he rocked me on his knee. We were living in the days at Merton near Dominic's." After a while, he fell again into complete torpor. Then, turning Švejk, he winked an eye and asked, "How are you today, madam? Are you going somewhere for the summer?" He said after a short pause, and seeing everything double, he asked, "So you already have a grown-up son, have you?" Saying this, he pointed to Švejk. "Sit down," said Švejk, when the chaplain tried to climb onto the seat. "Otherwise, I'll teach you how to behave." The chaplain became quiet and stared out at the droshky with his little piggy eyes. He had not the faintest idea what was actually happening to him. He no longer had a clue, and was turning to Švejk, he said dejectedly, "Madam, give me first class." Then he tried to take his trousers down. "Button yourself up at once, you swine," shouted Švejk at him. "All the droshky drivers know you only too well already. You spewed all over yourself once. Now do this. Don't imagine you'll get away with it without paying like you did last time." The chaplain, with a melancholy expression, popped his head on his hands and began to sing, "Nobody loves me anymore." But he broke off his song suddenly and remarked in German, "Excuse me, old man, you're a bloody idiot. I can sing what I like." He appeared to want to whistle some tune, but instead he emitted from his mouth such a powerful whoa that the droshky came to a standstill. When afterwards, at Švejk's order, they continued their journey further, the chaplain began to try to light his cigarette holder. "It doesn't burn," he said despondently, when he had used up a whole box of matches. "You're blowing at it." But at that moment, he lost the thread again and started to laugh. "This is a lark. We're alone on the tram, aren't we, my dear colleague?" He began to rummage in his pockets. "I've lost my ticket," he shouted. "Stop! I must find my ticket." He waved his hand resignedly. "All right, let's go on." He then began to wonder, in the vast majority of cases, "Yes, all right, in all cases. You're quite wrong. Second floor? That's just an excuse. It's not my concern, but yours, my dear madam. Bell, please. I had a black coffee." In a half dream, he began to squabble with an imaginary enemy who was disputing his right to sit by the window in a restaurant, and then began to mistake the droshky for a train, and leaning out of the window, shrieked at the street in Czech and German, "Neinberg, or change!" Švejk pulled himself back, and the chaplain forgot about the train and began to give various animal imitations. He spent longest over the cock-a-doodle-doo, resounded triumphantly from the droshky. And I hand over the reading to DeYonker in Denver.
For some time, he was very active and restless and tried to fall out of the droshky, swearing at the passers-by and calling them gutter snipes. Then he threw his handkerchief out of the droshky and shouted that they must stop because he had lost his luggage. Then he began to tell a story. In Budějovice, there was once a drummer. He got married. A year later, he died. He burst out laughing. Isn't that a good story? All this time, Švejk treated the chaplain with ruthless severity. On the various occasions when the chaplain tried some tricks on him, such as falling out of the droshky or breaking the seat, Švejk gave him 1 or 2 punches under the ribs, which the chaplain accepted with unusual apathy. Only once did he make an attempt to mutiny and jump out of the droshky, saying that he wouldn't go any further and that he knew they were going to Podmakli instead of Budějovice. In the course of 1 minute, Švejk had liquidated his mutiny completely and forced him to return to his previous position on the seat, taking care that he did not fall asleep. The mildest thing he said during all this was, "Don't fall asleep, you death's head." Suddenly, the chaplain had an attack of melancholy and began to sob, asking Švejk whether he had a mother. "Folks, I'm all alone in this world," he shouted from the droshky. "Take care of me." "Don't make a scandal," Švejk rebuked him. "Stop, or else everyone will say you're tight." "I haven't touched a drop, old man," answered the chaplain. "I'm completely sober." But suddenly he stood up, saluted, and said in German, "Humbly report, sir, I'm sozzled. I'm a filthy hog." He repeated 10 times in succession in hopeless and sincere despair. And turning to Švejk, he persistently begged and entreated, "Throw me out of the car. Why are you taking me with you?" He sat down again and muttered, "Rings are forming round the moon. Captain, do you believe in the immortality of the soul? Can a horse get to heaven?" He started to laugh aloud, but in a moment, again, grew sad and looked apathetically at Švejk, saying, "Excuse me, sir, I've seen you from somewhere before. Were you ever in Vienna? I remember you from the seminary." He amused himself for a while by reciting Latin verses. "Aurea primus ata est aetas, que vindicivulo." "I can't go on. Throw me out. Why won't you throw me out? I won't do anything to myself. I want to fall on my nose," he announced in a resolute tone. "Sir," he continued again imploringly, "dear old man, give me 1 across the jaw." "1 or several?" asked Švejk. "2? Here you are." The chaplain counted the blows aloud as they came, beaming blissfully all the time. "That does one a lot of good," he said. "It helps the stomach and promotes the digestion. Give me another." "Thank you very much," he called, when Švejk immediately obliged him. "I'm completely satisfied. Tear open my waistcoat, please." He expressed the most varied wishes. He wanted Švejk to dislocate his leg, to throttle him for a bit, to cut his nails, and to pull out his front teeth. He exhibited yearnings for martyrdom, asking him to cut off his head and throw him in a sack into the Vltava. "Some stars round my head would suit me very well," he said with enthusiasm. "I should need 10. Then he began to speak about the races and quickly went over to the ballet, which, however, did not detain him for long either. "Do you dance the Czardash?" he asked Švejk. "Do you know the bear dance? Like this?" He tried to jump in the air, but fell on Švejk, who began to box him and then laid him out on the seat. "I want something," shouted the chaplain, "but I don't know what. Don't you know what I want?" He hung his head in complete resignation. What business of mine is it what I want?" he said solemnly. And it's no business of yours either, is it, sir? I don't know you. How dare you rebuke me? Do you know how to fence?" For a moment, he became more aggressive, and he tried to push Švejk off the seat. Then, when Švejk had calmed him a bit and had not scrupled to give him a taste of his physical superiority, the chaplain asked, "Is it Monday or Friday today?" He was anxious to know, too, whether it was December or June, and exhibited a great aptitude for asking the most diverse questions, such as, "Are you married? Do you like gorgonzola? Do you have bugs at home? Are you all right? Has your dog had distemper?" He became communicative. He told how he owed money for riding breeches, a whip and a saddle, that he'd had VD some years ago and had cured it with permanganate. "There was no idea of trying anything else, no time for it," he said with a belch. "It may seem to you pretty drastic, but tell me, what am I to do? You must forgive me. Thermos flask," he continued, forgetting what he had been talking about a moment ago, "is the name for the receptacles which keep drinks and food in their original warmth. Which do you think, my dear colleague, is the fairer game, Fable or 21? Really, I've seen you somewhere before," he called out, trying to embrace Švejk and kiss him with salivary lips. "We were at school together. You're a good chap," he said tenderly, stroking his own leg. How you've grown from the time when I last saw you. The pleasure of seeing you makes up for all my sufferings. A poetic mood came over him, and he began to speak of going back to the sunshine of happy faces and warm hearts. Then he knelt down and began to pray, Ave Maria, laughing to split his sides. When they stopped before his apartment, it was very difficult to get him out of the droshky. We aren't there yet, he shrieked. Help, they're kidnapping me. I want to go on. He was literally torn out of the droshky like a boiled snail from its shell. At one moment, it seemed as if he would be pulled apart because his legs got stuck behind the seat. Ooh. He laughed loudly when this was happening, saying he had diddled them. You are tearing me apart, gentlemen. Then he was dragged through the carriage entrance up to the steps to his apartment, and once inside, thrown like a sack onto the sofa. He declared that he wouldn't pay for the car, which he hadn't ordered, and it took more than a quarter of an hour for them to explain to him that it was a droshky. And even then, he did not agree, objecting that he only drove in a fiacre. You're trying to diddle me, he declared, winking knowingly at Švejk and at the droshky driver. We walked here. And suddenly, in an outburst of generosity, he threw his purse to the driver. Take it all. I can pay. A kreutzer, more or less, doesn't make any difference to me. He really should have said 36 kreutzers because that was all the purse contained. Fortunately, the driver subjected him to an exhaustive search, talking of swipes over the jaw as he did so. All right, then, give me one, the chaplain answered. Do you think I couldn't take it? I could manage 5 from you. In the chaplain's waistcoat pocket, the driver found 10 crowns. He went away cursing his fate and the chaplain for wasting his time and ruining his business. The chaplain took some time to fall asleep because he kept on making new plans. He wanted to do all sorts of things, play the piano, take dancing lessons, and fry fish. Then he promised Švejk his sister, although he did not have one. And he also asked to be taken off to bed, and finally he fell asleep, asserting that he wished to be regarded as a human being, which was just as valuable an entity as a pig. And now I pass the wand to where I normally would be in New York City with Michelle Beshaw.
When Švejk entered the chaplain's room in the morning, he found him lying on the sofa and puzzling hard. How it could happen that someone had wetted him in such a peculiar way that he had got stuck to the leather couch with his trousers. Humbly report, sir, said Švejk, that in the night in a few words, he explained to the chaplain that he was terribly mistaken if he thought that he had been wetted. The chaplain, who had an unusually heavy hangover, was in a depressed mood. I can't remember, he said, how I got from the bed to the sofa. You were never on the bed, sir. As soon as we got you here, we laid you on the sofa. That was as far as we could manage. And what have I been up to? Was I up to anything at all? Wasn't I perhaps drunk? Not half, sir, answered Švejk, but totally you were, sir. A little delirium came over you. I hope it'll help you to change your clothes and wash. I feel as if someone had given me a drubbing, complained the chaplain, and I'm thirsty too. Did I have a brawl yesterday? It wasn't too bad, sir. The thirst is the result of the thirst you had yesterday. A chap doesn't get over it so quickly. I knew a cabinet maker who got drunk for the first time on New Year's Eve in 1910. And on the morning of the 1st of January, he had such a thirst and felt so bad that he bought a salted herring and started drinking again. And he's got on doing that every day for 4 years, and no one can help him because he always buys his salted herring on Saturday for the whole week. It's a proper merry-go-round, as our old sergeant major in the 91st Regiment used to say. The chaplain was suffering from 100% hangover and was in a state of utter depression. Anyone who had been listening to him at that moment would have been convinced that he regularly attended the lectures of Dr. Alexander Batyak. We must declare war to the death on the demon alcohol who slaughters our best men. And been reading his 100 ethical sparks. He modified it slightly, it's true. If, he said, you drank noble drinks like arak, maraschino, cognac, all right. But yesterday I drank some frightful Borovichka. I'm surprised I could swill that stuff like I did. It had a disgusting taste in it. Oh, if only it had been a griot. People think up all kinds of filth and drink them like water. Borovichka like that doesn't even taste good. It doesn't have any color in it. It burns your throat. Oh, if only it had been the genuine article, distilled from juniper, like I once drank in Moravia. But it was made out of some kind of wood alcohol and scented oils. Oh, look how I'm belching. Alcohol is poison, he decided. It must be original and genuine and not manufactured synthetically in a factory the way the Jews do it. The same with rum. Good rum is a rarity. Oh, if only we had some Ozhikovka, he sighed. That would put my stomach right, the sort of Ozhikovka that Captain Schnabel in Bruska has. He began rummaging in his pockets to examine his purse. I've only got 36 kreutzers. What about selling the sofa? He reflected. What do you think? Would anyone buy it? I'll tell the landlord that I've lent it to somebody or somebody's stolen it. But no, I'll keep the sofa. I'll send you to Captain Schnabel to ask him to lend me 100 crowns. The day before yesterday, he had a win at cards. If you don't get anything from him, then go to the barracks at Vershovice to Lieutenant Mahler. And if you don't succeed with him, you can go to Hradčany to Captain Fischer. You can tell him that I've got to pay for my horse's fodder and that I've spent all my money on drink. And if you don't have any luck with him, we'll pause the piano and damn what happens. I'll write you a few general lines. Don't let yourself get fobbed off. Say I need it and I'm quite broke. Think up whatever you like, but don't return empty-handed, otherwise I'll march you off to the front. Ask Captain Schnabel where he buys his Ozhikovka and buy 2 bottles of it. Švejk discharged his mission brilliantly. His sincerity and honest countenance won him complete confidence, and no one doubted the truth of what he was saying. He considered it appropriate in the presence of Captain Schnabel, Captain Fischer, and Lieutenant Mahler not to say that the chaplain had to pay for his horse's fodder, but to support his request for a loan by saying that the chaplain had to pay paternity alimony. He was given the money in all 3 places. Having acquitted himself honorably on his expedition and brandishing on return the 300 crowns, the chaplain, who had by this time taken a bath and put on clean clothes, was very surprised. I took the whole lot in one go, said Švejk, so that we shouldn't have to worry our heads about money again tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It went pretty smoothly, but I did have to go on my knees to Captain Schnabel. He's a real Schwein. But when I told him that we had to pay alimony, alimony? The chaplain repeated in horror. Well, yes, alimony, sir, compensation for the women, you know. Well, you told me that I should think up something and I couldn't hit on anything else. Where I come from, a cobbler paid alimony to 5 different girls. He was quite desperate about it and had to go and borrow money too. But everybody was ready to believe that he was in a frightful situation. They asked me what the girl was like, and I said she was very pretty and not yet 15. And so they wanted her address. Oh, you've certainly made a nice mess of it, Švejk, sighed the chaplain and began to walk up and down in his room. That's another nice scandal, he said, clutching his head. Oh, I've got a terrible headache. I gave them the address of an old deaf lady in the street where I live, explained Švejk. I wanted to do the thing properly because an order is an order. I wouldn't let myself get fobbed off, and I had to think of something. Well, and now they're waiting in the hallway for the piano. I brought them here so they could take it away to the pawn shop, sir. It won't be a bad thing when the piano's gone. Well, there'll be more room and we shall have more money all together and we shall have peace for a day or two. And well, if the landlord asks about the piano, I'll just say that there are strings broken in it and we have sent it away to the factory for repair. I've already told the concierge so she won't think that it's strange when they take away the piano and load it into the van. And I also have a purchaser for the sofa. He's a friend of mine, a dealer in secondhand furniture, and he's coming here this afternoon. The leather sofa fetches a good price today. Is that all you've done, Švejk? Asked the chaplain, continuing to clutch his head and looking desperate. Well, humbly reports, sir, instead of 2 bottles of Orzhakovka, which Captain Schnabel buys, I have bought 5, so that we can have something in reserve to drink. Can they come and take the piano before the pawn shop closes? The chaplain waved his hand hopelessly, and a few minutes later, they were already loading the piano onto the van. When Švejk returned from the pawn shop, he found the chaplain sitting in front of an open bottle of Orzhakovka and swearing because the cutlet he had got for lunch had been underdone. He was again half seas over. He declared to Švejk that from tomorrow he would lead a new life. Drinking alcohol was vulgar materialism and one must live a spiritual life. He spoke philosophically for about half an hour and then when he opened a 3rd bottle, the furniture dealer arrived and the chaplain sold him this sofa for a song. He invited him to talk to him and was very discontented when the furniture dealer excused himself on the grounds that he had still to go and buy a bedside table. It's a pity I haven't got one, said the chaplain reproachfully. A man can't think of everything. After the furniture dealer left, the chaplain started up a friendly conversation with Švejk, with whom he drank another bottle. Part of his talk was taken up with his personal attitude toward women and cards. They were sitting for a long time, and evening found them deep in friendly conversation. In the night, however, their relationship changed. The chaplain turned to his condition of the day before, mixed Švejk up with someone else and said to him, "Oh no, please don't leave now. Do you remember the red-haired cadet from the baggage train?" This idyll continued until Švejk said to the chaplain, "Look, I'm fed up. Now you'll climb into bed and snooze. Do you understand?" "Well, I'm climbing, my dear boy. I'm climbing in. Why shouldn't I climb in?" babbled the chaplain. "Do you remember we were in 5th form together and I used to do your Greek exercises for you? Well, you've got a villa at Zabraslav and you can go by steamer to the Vltava. Do you know where the Vltava is?" Švejk forced him to take off his boots and undress. Chaplain obeyed, with a protest directed at some unknown persons. "You see, gentlemen," he said to the cupboard and to the ficus, "you see, gentlemen, how they treat me, my relations. I don't even know my relations," he suddenly decided, getting into bed. "Even if heaven and earth were to conspire against me, I don't know them." And the room resounded with his snoring. And next up, we have J.B. Alexander from New York City.
It was during those days, too, that Švejk went to visit his old charwoman, Mrs. Mueller. In his apartment, Švejk found her cousin, who told him in tears that Mrs. Mueller had been arrested the same evening that she pushed Švejk off to the war in a bath chair. They had court-martialed the old lady and, finding no evidence against her, had taken her off to a concentration camp at Steinhof. A card had already come from her. Švejk took this precious household relic and read, "Dear Anika, we are enjoying ourselves very much here. We are all well. The woman in the next bed to me has spotted, and also there are here people with small. Otherwise, everything is in order. We have plenty to eat and collect potatoes for soup. I have heard that Mrs. Švejk is already, so find out somehow where he is laid so that after the war we can decorate his grave. I forgot to tell you that in the right-hand corner in the attic, there is a little dog in a box, a miniature pincher puppy, but he hasn't had anything to eat for several weeks, ever since they came to fetch me because of, so I suppose that it's already too late and the little dog is also resting with," and across the whole letter, there was a pink stamp in German, "Censored, Imperial and Royal Concentration Camp Steinhof." "And the little dog was really dead," sobbed Mrs. Mueller's cousin, "and you never recognized your apartment either. I've got some dressmakers lodging there and they've turned it into a real ladies' fashion parlor. Everywhere there are fashion pictures on the walls and flowers in the windows." Mrs. Mueller's cousin was not to be comforted. Amid continuous sobbing and lamentation, she finally expressed the fear that Švejk had deserted from the army and wanted to ruin her too and bring her into misery. Finally, she spoke to him as though he were an infamous adventurer. "That's really priceless," said Švejk. "I really love that. And let me tell you, Mrs. Kerr, that you are absolutely right about my getting out. I had to kill 15 sergeants and sergeants major, but don't tell anybody." Švejk left his home, which was so unwelcoming to him, saying, "Mrs. Kerr, I've got some collars and shirt fronts at the laundry. Please fetch them for me so that when I come back from the war, I'll have some mufti to put on. And please see too that the moths don't get in my suits in the wardrobe. And give my love to those young ladies who are sleeping in my bed." And then Švejk went to pay a visit to the chalice. When Mrs. Palovich saw him, she declared that she wouldn't serve him, as he had probably deserted. "My husband," she started, the same old gramophone record, "was so careful, and he's there. He's locked up, poor dear, all for nothing. People like you are free to roam about and desert from the army. They were looking for you here again only last week. We are more cautious than you," she concluded. "And all the same, we're in the soup. Not everyone has your luck." The conversation was overheard by an elderly man, a locksmith from Smichov, who went up to Švejk and said, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind waiting for me outside? I've got something to talk to you about." In the street, he talked confidentially to Švejk, believing him to be a deserter on the basis of Mrs. Palovich's opinion. He told him that he had a son who had deserted too and was with his grandmother at Yashina near Yosifov. Disregarding Švejk's assurances that he was not a deserter, he pressed a 20-crown piece into his hand. "That's a bit of first aid," he said, dragging him into a wine restaurant at the corner. "I understand you. You don't need to be afraid of me." Švejk returned late at night to the chaplain, who had not yet come home. He did not come home till the next morning, when he woke up Švejk and said, "Tomorrow we're going to celebrate a drumhead mass. Make some coffee, put some rum in it, or better still, make some grog."
Thank you, JB, and thanks to everyone from our terrific crew for Chapter 10.
Za císaře pana a jeho rodinu. Za císaře pana a jeho rodinu. Museli jsme vybojovat Hercegovinu.